Hi, this is Michèle from Dasami Publishing, and we're in our 19th episode of Dasami Bookworm Podcast. Now, if you hear a little bit background noise, it's because we are on Glasgow University grounds. And the reason we're doing that today is because we're talking about all things education. So I'm delighted to introduce Isadora Bastos, who has been an intern and is now working on with translations. But it's going to, Isadora, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me again.
It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
So today we'll be talking about the educational system, and in a way, if you take us through the path to Dasami, and then we'll have questions afterwards. So please tell me about Brazil. How does the education system work?
So for us, we start at what you guys would call kindergarten. So I started going to school very early. I was 3. And then you already start with all the words and stuff to prepare you for what I guess you would call primary, right? In Brazil, it is different from here because you do get a lot of classes at once. You just get classes at once. So here, you know how you have electives? We don't do that, and that goes throughout our whole academic career. You don't choose what you're learning, you just learn everything. So from primary all the way to high school, you will have maths, Portuguese, science, and then the science is split once you hit what you would call, I guess, elementary, right? Like the 11 to 14, and then 15 to 17 is high school, so it's just 3 years. So the sciences start to split. Portuguese splits into, well, Portuguese is a grammar subject and literature. And there's people with us. So these split, and then you get more and more subjects, but you don't choose. You have to take them all.
And why do they split? What takes you in either direction, Isadora?
So what used to be science, and we would just, talk about how oil doesn't mix with water, becomes physics, chemistry, and biology separately. And Portuguese becomes this grammar, literature. You get maths becomes, basic maths, geometry. And I think there was another one that was like, I don't even know how to translate it, but it was a geometrical drawing.
Geometry, yes.
But it wasn't, geometry was one, and then they had like desenho geometry, so it was drawings, and it was, I hated it. I am not, as you can see, I am a words person, not a numbers person. I hated it. So that's what actually started my path into publishing, and my love for it is I absolutely hated numbers, but I can talk for Scotland and other countries, and I really enjoyed just literature. Reading was incredible, discussing books was incredible. However, we do have an educational system that is very much right answer, wrong answer. So critical thinking was something that was it was built up at home with my parents. My parents were very much like, you can question anything we say as long as you do it respectfully. So I have to say this is a big part of why I went into publishing, is my parents always encouraged me to think critically about what I was reading, what I was watching, they wanted to know, and they wanted me to argue about things politely, otherwise I wouldn't be here today.
So is it about a choice when you're 11 to 13 what you want to do later in life that puts you on the path? Does the educational system put you on that path? Or how is it you select which type of maths you want to go on, or the path to publishing?
So you have to do all of them. To the end of your education, you have to do all of the maths, all of the Portuguese, all of the everything. But then once you finish high school, you have a test. If you do want to go into college or university, for us it's all the same, that is called vestibular. That is a test, a long test. And so you can do this vestibular for specific universities in specific subjects. So it will be basic knowledge from high school. If you want to be a vet, for an example, like my mom, you will answer more on the sciences, on the biology area. If you want to do publishing like me, you will answer on the literary, grammatical areas. but there is basic knowledge in all of them, as far as I understand. I never took that test.
Oh.
No, I paid, because you have to pay to take them for universities. So I paid for about 3 or 4 of them. I didn't, my mom did. And I didn't attend because I did not want to go to university in Brazil. And yeah, so that was the end of my experience with it, was to pay for all of it and not attend. But as my parents have done several of these tests, because my mom has 2 university degrees. She did it forest engineering and then veterinary. It is based, that is when you choose your career path. It's, you choose what kind of test you're going to take for which university, and then you need to reach a score, and if you're under that score, you're not in. If you're above the score, then you're in. You're
Pass,
just in.
fail.
Yeah, you exactly.
Pass,
this
fail.
is as basic as that. There is another test that students take at the end of high school. It's called Enem, and that is basic, not like everything. There's no specific subject for that. And with that score, you can also get into university. If you score really high, then universities will automatically take you, because obviously you know a lot about everything that has been taught to you. But yeah, that's a harder test, I feel.
So from prior conversations, I know that you did attend high school in Canada. Tell us about that place. How was it there?
That was the best. I much like other kids, I didn't love going to school in Brazil. I loved studying, I loved learning, I didn't like school. And then when I went to Canada, I went on a Rotary exchange. I was 16, and I got into grade 11, and I absolutely adored it because we could choose electives. And then in Canada, I chose English and literature, which were also separate, and theater, which is my passion and is one of the reasons that I want to go into publishing. Is, well, theater is literature standing up, right?
Exactly.
So I was absolutely in love with it, the fact that I could choose what I was going to learn besides the core classes. And when I realized that, you know, the rest of high school was like that as well, and university would be like that outside of Brazil, I didn't want anything to do with Brazil at all. I returned to Canada later and finished high school there as well. So I finished high school in Brazil, and then I went and did another year in Canada to get a Commonwealth diploma.
So you're obviously well educated, but really well educated. International. So then now you've come to Glasgow and you're studying here. Tell us about the degree that you've gone for here.
I finished my undergrad this June in English literature and theater studies.
Yeah.
So my passions were revealed at a young age, but in Canada, that really, when I chose to study them, that really came forth really strongly. And then I chose that for university. Now I'm doing my master's in translation studies. And when I was doing my undergrad, I really, really, really wanted an internship in publishing because I wanted to find out more about the industry before I tried to dive into it professionally. And so I wrote many, many publishers, and I think 3 people answered me, and Michèle was one of them. And that's how we got here today.
Excellent. Sometimes it's a longer path, a shorter path, but the path to doing what it is that you truly love. So in getting your bachelor's here at Glasgow University, what is it that you enjoyed most? I know the literature and of course the entertaining, the arts and such, which it is all about language and how language is expressed. Is there a particular class that you took that was memorable, or is there a particular subject, one of the parts of literature that you really enjoyed?
There were a lot of them, but in 3rd and 4th year we have more electives branching out, and I took fantastic literature, which was one of my favorites because I don't love fantasy. It's not the type of book that I usually read, but when I took the class, it was so amazing to see the depths of it, because people might think I did that, oh yeah, dragons and witches, and it's just not my vibe. But it's not just that. There are dragons and witches, and it's fantastic, but obviously fantastic literature. But there are other things like Dora's Lesson. So to learn about the depths of genres was incredible. I did sci-fi. I loved the literature. I hated the assignments. It wasn't for me. So it's definitely something I wouldn't study going forward. Yeah, fantastic literature was incredible, and I did post-colonial literature, which is very much my focus always, in post-colonial context in the world. And that was amazing. The books that we read there, the opinions that we talked about. I think it's A Small Island by Jamaica Kincaid. Is it? Yeah. Absolutely incredible. I would never have read it. I would never have come across it. And I'm extremely grateful to that class for those gems. And yeah.
That's the most wonderful part of education, is when you are able to explore ideas and have an exchange of ideas, not just about learning something and then repeating it on an exam, but actually understanding the meaning underneath it, what is there, and drilling down. And that is how we all come up with different ideas. Whenever anyone watches a play or a movie or listens to a podcast, whatever it might be, we all bring our own history to it and what we've learned. So when you exchange those ideas, as you do, that's how we actually learn.
And I think that's fantastic, and it's a fantastic conclusion to come to, because especially right now, Brazil it's not like that in education. It doesn't encourage this critical thinking from an early age, and it doesn't really encourage it in university, depending on what you take. So when I came to Glasgow and the tests were like, hey, you're going to choose a question and you're going to write an essay, and it's your opinion, like debate, convince us with everything that you've read and learned in class. That was amazing to be able to say, you know what, I don't think that's very valid, to a tutor, to a professor, and say, I disagree with that because this and this and this, and be able to have a debate was so much more fruitful than being told, what color is the bird in the book? And then you go blue. It's like, no, it's red. End of story. You failed. There's so much more to literature. There's so much more to every subject, I suppose, than just the right answer. And this is actually an appeal to any Brazilians out there studying in Brazil. Be critical. I don't care if your teacher doesn't like you. Just be critical. It's important.
And it's about thinking. And to come back to the color, if someone's colorblind, they're not going to see that color. So that's another question there too.
Exactly.
Because it's depending on where you're coming from, where we are. If you're colorblind, you're not going to notice that. You won't be able to tell the difference because it's all shades of gray. And like a lot of life, it's very much shades of gray. So with the translation, what's the goals that you want for your education over the next year, Isadora?
So once I get this master's, because I will, I have faith.
Of course you will.
Once I do, I hope to work with translation in publishing, look for in-house translation, positions, roles. But I hope to work remotely because, as we were talking, exchanging ideas is very important, and I would like to do a job that allows me not only to share ideas with others, which translation does that. I'm learning a lot about how it's your own text, but I want to travel and see other contexts, think about the works I'm translating and what I'm working on in other contexts. How would people view that work there in the target language or the target reader? And I think that a job that allows me to move will make me a better professional altogether in whatever I end up doing.
Well, I think the world has changed enough to recognize that there is more flexibility about working from, because we have the computers, and the internet, and are able to travel anywhere and work remotely, so that you don't actually have to go to an office and sit behind a desk to actually do the work that you want to do. You can, it's necessary in some positions, obviously. However, if you've selected something where you can work remotely and explore it, and one of the reasons your translation was so key to Jasami is that because Portuguese is your own language, and it's about understanding the culture behind it, because if someone learns different language, you might be extremely articulate, but it's not just about that, it's about understanding the culture. So when you did the translations, and I know the rhyming text of Bernie was a bit of a challenge. Not insurmountable, but a challenge. But the other stories, it's about relating that story and what it will mean in Brazil.
It is, and it's something that I've translated text from Portuguese into English before, because, I mean, I love English as my chosen language, but it is so interesting how we talk about this now at a master's level, and how I am not allowed, but, you know, I can't take a course where I translate into English. It's just not allowed. I have to translate into my language because of cultural context. So, and that is, you know, something I never thought of. I thought if I know 2 languages, you know, I can go between. And I possibly could, because I've been living here long enough. I've been living in English for the last 10 years. But still, there are things that I learn every day that I'm like, I didn't know that word could mean this or that. So these little things, not that I know all the things in Portuguese as well, you know, but it's so important, and it's so important to remember the context of today when you're working in translations. What kids will be reading that? It's not the same kids as in the 1950s, right? So what are we learning from that? Because Bernie the Bear is about wildlife being in the wild and being preserved that way. I mean, at least when I read it, I thought, yes, Bernie cannot go into the city because it's not going to go well.
No. Bear wandering in the city, definitely not a good idea.
Doesn't go well.
And it's not tough on the people, it's tough on the poor wee bear.
Exactly. So it reminded me of that video. I don't know if you've seen it, Michèle, of this mama bear walking on top of she's on top of a wall, and her cubs are behind her, and the dogs start jumping at her because it's a residential area. So this woman comes out. She's not doing anything. She's just like swatting at them, like not even trying to hurt them. And this woman comes and grabs her dogs, obviously, and she has to push the bear off the wall. And I felt bad for the bear. I mean, what is she gonna do? Because we are destroying wildlife, and I feel like this is so important for kids to begin with that idea of, oh no, bears don't belong here. But what in turn does that mean? That critical thinking again. Where does the bear belong if there is no wild areas for them? So,
and it's interesting to think about 1,000 years ago, bears did roam in Scotland. So that was one of the reasons behind it. It's, yes, the world changes and ecology changes, and it evolves and accepts. The one thing is humans do make the biggest changes on life, and if we recognize that and make the proper preservations, you know, like they did in the States with Yosemite National Park, they set that aside and said, no one's going to go in there, nature will, you know, we do need to take steps for it. And educating a child like Bernie the Bear, it's a very, very, I call it a gentle environmental story. However, it's about learning from that young age, because children are smart and they understand and they learn. And it's exploring that and making sure. And even what you did with little Charlie Ryan, you know, and the Smarty tree, and certain words in there. I think it was the Milo, the chocolate, wasn't in Portuguese.
I had no idea what that
it. So there are words that don't exist in other languages, and you would recognize that and see, oh, yes, this needs to be something different.
Yes.
So regarding the process of translation, is it the process itself that you enjoy, Isadora? And if so, what part of it? What is it that you enjoy about translating?
I really like seeing the text transformed into the new language, because it is different. It's the same story, has the same contents, we hope, but it is a different text, because it will depend on, for an example, text with dialect. It will never be the same in another language. We will just have to find a dialect to, you know, supplement that, and it becomes a different text, because someone who would be, I don't know, Glaswegian in a text might be Mineiro in a Brazilian text, and it's completely different, but it will carry an identity that won't exist in the source text, but will exist in the translation text. So it is in itself a different work, a new work, and I think that is fantastic.
So rather than a translation process, it's almost like a recreation process.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You need to reimagine things.
I think that's wonderful. I think that stories are so elemental to all of us, and sharing stories throughout the world is the important part. So if you can understand, especially, bringing all the cultures together, and an understanding and a basic knowledge is so key. Well, it sounds like your translation journey has been a wonderful.
It has.
And the educational system that brought you to Jasami, which is we're most appreciative of, obviously.
Aww.
Obviously.
Thank you.
So, to wrap this up, I think I would say that Jasami has absolutely and positively been gifted to have the translation of the stories, to share them with the world, because we want to share our stories with the world. Little Charlie Ryan and his adventures, and the misadventures and adventures of Bernie the Bear, and the other stories, Journeys with Joy. Again, international, but short, but lovely, and so can be shared with all of them, not just Brazil who speaks Portuguese, but in Portugal, anyone. And we actually have a few of them going to Zambia, which is wonderful.
That's amazing.
Sharing it with the world. So I think the next thing I would like to say is, who would you like to do a shout out to?
My shout out goes to my mom, who just recently left Scotland and absolutely loved Jasami and the book fair and everything. So yeah, my shout outs to Mom. Hi, Mom.
And my shout out is to all of the translation students who are working there, who work on recreating the stories so that they can be shared throughout the world. And it's very important to us. So I wish to thank all of you for joining us. It's Michèle at Jasami Bookworm Podcast. And again, if you've enjoyed this, we've been on site at Glasgow University, just to remind you, in case you've heard anything else. And as I do every week, I wish you a sunny day. Thank you very much for joining us.